Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by Dr. Mike Prebeg. Dr. Prebeg is a certified chiropractic sports physician specializing in neurofunctional sports performance, working with the world's top professional athletes. Dr. Prebeg is an innovative practitioner specializing in performance enhancement, career longevity, and injury recovery. As a graduate of New York Chiropractic College and a certified chiropractic sports physician, Dr. Prebeg provides unparalleled treatments through his unique combination of soft tissue techniques, such as active release, with contemporary medical acupuncture and joint manipulation. Years of academic and hands-on experience have catapulted his expertise to the front of the field, making him the go-to practitioner for some of the most complicated cases among professional athletes. His success with these patients has earned him the position of consulting chiropractor for the National Hockey League NHL Players Association and the New York Yankees baseball team. Fantastic conversation we have with Doc. We talk about his mentor, specifically Charlie Francis. We speak about treatments for hockey players, both movement hardware in terms of DNS and PRI, and software in terms of acupuncture, the physiology of those treatments. It's really fascinating. And finally, the current landscape in high performance hockey in terms of the medical teams and high performance models. Fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Of course. You know what? At the end of every podcast, every single guest that we've had, I always ask the person interviewed, I say, who are one or two people that you strongly would encourage to get on this podcast? And I had an interview with Matty Nickel, and you were one of the first individuals that came out of his mouth. So let me start by asking you that relationship. How was it garnered? I know you've been in hockey for a while, since 2004, correct?
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
How did you meet Matty?
Interesting. I did a lot of work with Charlie Francis back in the days, the late Charlie Francis. I used to work on the track with him and his athletes in York University.
Wow.
And Matty, who I didn't know, was down the track. He was training all his CFL players, all his football players. And I was there with Charlie and treating, whatever athletes he had in with them. He had a range from track and field to then he'd get some football guys, some basketball guys. He'd always have someone new flying in. But I was at least once a week, I was on the track with him, and he was feet. And the one thing I do regret, and in my career, in my life, is I was sitting there with a genius, but you're young and you don't know what you don't know. And I listened to him and I paid attention to him, but I didn't realize the depth of the stuff he was spoon feeding me and force feeding me. So later on in my career, I've realized what an effect he had on training and performance worldwide. But I'm sitting there with the guy every day, and he's just an unassuming guy with this, and doing his thing and mumbling and kind of not saying much, very quiet, very to himself. But it was pretty cool, being with him, seeing all that stuff, being exposed to all that. I would do my thing. Matt was, I always tell you the truth, I always took note of Matt too, down on the other side of the gym or mid gym. He was with all his CFL guys, just a bunch of big dudes, and there he is training them, and kind of, I'd take note of the gym, there was always little groups.
Yeah.
And there's one guy that was training with Matt, started doing some speed work with Charlie, and then through him, I was treating him. So then Matt kind of started talking to me about, what I was doing with him. And then he asked me to look at a couple of his players. And then we just started slowly working together like that. It was all through football and other stuff, nothing hockey related.
I got to ask you another question off the cuff. I warned you about this before we started talking. I said I might ask. Charlie Francis, legendary. We look back many, many years, and some of the pragmatic genius that he has is so relevant today, specifically for young coaches looking back at some of the lessons. What are a couple things that you think now, looking back over all the years, maybe one or two takeaways that you thought, wow, like maybe heuristic rules of thumb, anything you could share with us that you learned or picked up from Charlie? I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think it would be pretty cool.
Charlie was a genius and this is one of the reasons why people don't realize what he was doing, because he'd make something that's very complicated into something that's extremely simple. For instance, he wasn't training muscles or the athlete per se. He was training the nervous system. And that's what he would always talk about. And frankly, there was times that there was athletes there, and some of these football guys would come up. I remember that, they'd go out at night in Toronto, and then they'd come to to the track, and he'd watch them do one little sprint or one warm up, and he'd be, Mike, work with them, and he'd walk away. And the guy's like, I just flew up for this. What are you talking about? And Charlie would, you're recover. We're gonna do it tomorrow. And the guy's like, recover? You were out last night. Talk to you later. Bye bye, Mike. And then he just like, I'm like, and even me, I'm like, what am I supposed to do anyway?
Holy.
So if you want to get faster, and that's what Charlie's one of the things that he was known for was speed. You had to train at 100%. You can't get your nervous system to speed up if you're training at 80%. So if you're training, you got to be training at 100%, 110. That's the only way you're going to go. So if someone wasn't ready, you let them say, recover. Tomorrow was another day. Let's do it again, because you're not going to get any benefits. But Charlie would take complex matters and make them simple. Like, for instance, he used reflexes rather than telling people to jump, very complicated things, but he'd make complicated things and he'd simplify them for the athlete so that, someone that's watching thinks it's simple, but you didn't realize, again, with really good strength coaches and sports psychologists, scientists, and even therapists, they take complicated and they simplify it. You think it's simple, but people don't realize the processes that are going, behind in the central processing unit, that's creating this, we're typing and some simple things. The computer does its thing, but there's a lot of circuitry that's going on behind the screen. And that's what I find the really talented, really special people do, is make very complicated into simple. But the tragedy is then, especially in this day and age, people think the simple is simple.
So well put. They say Michelangelo, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I know from a programming standpoint, Charlie has his DNA all over our thought process behind how we design, specifically with energy systems, that high-low model, not training at that submaximal level because we're not fast enough to get speed, and we're too slow to recover in between bouts. That high-low model. Just a brilliant genius, and I know Matt had expanded too when we spoke about his tutelage under Charlie. So fantastic, and thanks for sharing that with us. You've been involved at high-level performance for decades, consulting chiropractor with the National Hockey League, NHLPA. You worked with the Toronto Blue Jays 15 years, also with the Yankees. What led you into this career? Was that something, chiropractor, is that what you always wanted to do? Was it exercise science, turned to chiropractor? Like, what steps did you take?
Well, you're going to have to, I want to see this video to show all my other young aspiring chiropractors. I never thought of any of this. Yep. I never thought that this is attainable. I was in school, and I always said it. I did say it in school. I said, I want to be the best sports therapist, sports chiropractor out there. That's all I said. So what I did is in chiropractic college, I found the best therapists that were out there. All of them were doing ART. From there, I kind of got to know all the big names, and that I just started following them. I never even thought about treating an athlete. And all these people keep telling me they want to treat an athlete. I go, are you sure you want to treat an athlete? Because you're going to be compared to a lot of good guys. Like, they get treated by everybody. So you should be wanting to get really good at what you do. And then the athletes come. Everything comes if you're good at what you do. People they strive. What I think is they strive for the wrong thing. If you want to treat athletes, good. I'll give you an athlete right now. But now you're gonna sure he's gonna come back to you. What
So
are you going to
true.
do different? And how many other, do you know who else he's been treated by? Do you know who you're being compared to? If you don't, then you don't want to treat this guy because you might not ever see him again.
So well put. You can only bring out your client to your current level of education and experience. You better build those results and you better
Yeah,
have those before you start putting your hands, so quote unquote, or your programs on those people because
100%.
it's very interesting.
Yeah, you gotta know what's out there, what's in the market, who are you being, what do you have to so-called beat? Who's your competition, and what are you gonna? And it's not about competition. We're all about creating results for the athlete. That's
Yep.
the other thing. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about the athlete feeling as good as they can feel so that they can perform the results. If you keep accomplishing that, you're going to be very busy.
Fantastic. Your duties in terms of your chiropractor education, you said you never wanted to be a chiropractor. Where did you study? And correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I have this in your bio. You were a certified chiropractor, New York. You did New York Chiropractor College, correct? And then
Yes,
you took several courses
yes.
on not only ART but acupuncture. Could you expand upon that as well?
Yeah, I did. I did the ART courses back then. You know, if you were going to treat an athlete, if you were going to be in the sports realm, you needed to be versed at soft tissue, treatment. So ART was groundbreaking that back then, and it made waves in the athletic world for sure, and it opened up a lot of doors for chiropractors primarily, but all therapists in general.
Yep.
It's not about being a chiropractor or being a physio or being a massage. It's about having good hands and understanding anatomy, physiology,
Yep.
neurology. That's what it really. And then the metabolic system is a whole new universe. But yeah, so I graduated with a chiropractic degree, and then I was taking. Then I took the soft tissue courses with ART. I was teaching. I was involved as an instructor there, and then I started taking acupuncture. I took two different acupuncture courses, and the one that really transformed me or opened up my world was the McMaster Contemporary Acupuncture course. That's what it was called back then. There's been some rebranding under the neurofunctional acupuncture and stuff, but over there is what really gave me the paradigm, the treatment model that I employ today to this day.
I want to get back to that. I want to ask a little bit more about acupuncture, the physiology behind it, et cetera. But I want to stay on this idea of your education now and then your duties. I know that you are a consulting chiropractor in the National Hockey League, the NHLPA, the Players Association. What does that encompass for you in terms of your duties and responsibilities?
Right now, myself, I'm the only chiropractor. Recently, there's another chiropractor that's joined. That's going to be there, Melissa Givelos. She's a female, Dr. Melissa Givelos. She's a female chiropractor, which that's kind of cool
Yeah.
for a female to break that traditionally male realm. So we're the only chiropractors that are there, but it doesn't do much. Like my name and our names through the hockey world are kind
Yep.
of just through word of mouth and
Okay.
stuff like that, and through relationships.
Sure.
Uh, it gives a little bit more. You're a little more trustworthy when you kind of back the guys with the Players Association. I help out whenever they have questions regarding some treatment or some injuries or some. If anyone wants a second opinion, they go through the head doctor, and then through the head doctor, if he's got any questions, that's we've got a easy dialogue, and it's very easy to talk to each other. And just like I said, we're there for the players, and if I can give 2 cents, my 2 cents, that's what I do. But it's more on the treatment soft tissue side. But you're
Got it.
always going to still have to go through the MDs for the second opinions and stuff like that.
Certainly. Understand. Okay. Pivot slightly, Doc. Neurofunctional therapy. What is it? How does it compare to a typical chiropractor care?
Okay, that's something new, and that's
Okay.
what. So the contemporary acupuncture course, the guy there, Dr. Alejandro Loriega, who's one of my biggest mentors, although I've had many,
Sure.
um, he stressed treating the nervous system. Everyone wants to treat the structural system, muscles, tendons, joints. He would continue to say, well, that muscle is innervated by, your groin is innervated by the obturator nerve. Treat the nerve. Unless there's a massive rupture, or even if there is some scar tissue, some inhibition, there's a tear, you still treat the nerve. That'll support healing. And then when you're, return to play, treat the nerve. That'll reactivate the muscle, allow for proper neuromotor recruitment, and that'll help with the neuromotor repatterning and, so-called firing. But he'd always stress the nervous system, the nervous system, the nervous system. And I found at the beginning, because this is, we're taught in school, we're taught a structural model. This muscle's torn. This is scar tissue. This is a sprain, a strain. This is a tendinopathy. This is, your hip joint. Your joint is dysfunctional, so to speak. So the problem is when you do these MRIs of the images, for instance, we'll do the hockey hip. Well, I was going to say we could have done the shoulder, or we could do the hockey hip.
Let's go hip. I'd like this one.
Let's do the hip. MRI, every hockey player, 80% of them have hip labrum, hip issues. And these are asymptomatic. I think that's a study. I think the actual numbers are 70%, but it doesn't matter. We'll give you 70. Asymptomatic. So every hockey player's got hip issues.
Sure.
Why do they not have pain? And then all of a sudden, one day, why do they have pain? And then how many times have I had a player, you need surgery on your left hip, but your right hip's more degeneration. It's got more of a bony bump, but that one doesn't need surgery. This one does. Why? So this goes back to the neuro. If you're treating neurofunctionally, there's obviously an abnormal, a nociceptive, which is, conductance of pain information coming from the one hip and not the other. So it's not the structure. Everyone looks at structure. I had players that were told by a surgeon, you won't play. Back in the days, a very, good player was told he'd never play another season in the NHL. He played 3 seasons, still to this day hasn't had hip surgery that I know of. And he's been retired for a long time. He was with the Leafs. So don't get me, there's a time and a place for surgery, and surgery is phenomenal.
Sure.
But there's also a time that, I've seen also surgeries create a lot more problems than good too. So that it's a very much so a balancing act, and you got to know when to do one rather than the other. But you got to still treat all the stuff that's necessary to treat, to stabilize, to kind of, calm down the nervous system so that there's no pain. At least try to strengthen things before you start cutting them open. And frankly, if you have to cut them open afterwards, they're in a better position. And a lot of times the nervous system won't have the same, pain response after. The recovery should be better. So you do what we call prehab before the surgery. And so that's a bit of the prelude to where neurofunctional treatment came, because we're applying, especially acupuncture is a peripheral nerve stimulating device. So it's using the nervous system and stimulating, enhancing, optimizing, probably optimizing is the best term, the body's own natural healing mechanisms.
Sure.
And we want to optimize it. And then that's how we try to treat the athlete. So a lot of times, if I was treating structurally, I'd be very limited. There's cases that there's stuff that I've treated that I have no clue where to start. But if I apply the neurofunctional model, just start working on the nerve roots, start easing in, start work. Next thing you know, things start to free up and start to open up, and then you start being able to treat them properly. So the neurofunctional model has opened up what I can treat, my results, stuff that I wouldn't have a clue how to, where to go. You just start using, look at the innervation, look at the nerve roots, and start cleaning up the nerves, and then the muscles and the structure follows.
Very interesting. If I could sum up something, Doc, and please stop me if I'm wrong. I'm doing my best, Charlie Francis. I'm trying to simplify this. So the traditional model is more of hardware, right? And what we're saying is the software is very, very important, because the software runs the hardware. And if
precisely.
And if
Charlie,
we don't,
and Charlie did that back in the days. That's what I
sure.
was saying. He continued to talk about the nervous system, and it was like that's why he loved what we did, but we didn't understand Why? He loved it. I would sit there for days and sit there at his house and talk to him and his wife. And they were unbelievable to me. Like, we're talking from year one. Like,
That's awesome.
they took me under their wing. Great people.
That's unbelievable. So let me ask you, if our goal here for a strength and conditioning coach who doesn't have your background, is the cheap person's software something like just a muscle stim to get afferent feedback or quote unquote stimulation to the muscle, potentially for recovery in a non-injured athlete? Is there anything we as strength coaches can do, like a distant bronze or silver medal, comparatively speaking, to the gold standard of seeking someone like yourself for care?
Yeah. So there's many things actually. So, okay, now you're thinking about the afferent and just the peripheral nerve motor stimulus. Then there's the whole autonomic nervous system.
Yep.
So now the autonomic with fight or flight and so-called, recovery, you're trying to decrease sympathetic tone. So the muscle stim is great it's a great thing for people for repatterning, sometimes waking up a muscle that's kind of lagging for something, maybe just because of a little effusion. So you give it a little stim and allow the athlete to play their sport. So that's because it, helps get that muscle firing, get some blood flow in the area. The other thing that you could do is, again, the autonomic nervous system, which is even more important and more vital for recovery. And you could do stuff like cold baths are very, very popularized these days. So there's a lot of research into cold water therapy, and stuff, and even heat and cold, depending on what time of the day it is, what you're trying to accomplish. But that's a great way of stimulating recovery. The other stuff like, stuff that people don't even think about, go back to meditation, go back to yoga, some old school stuff. But because all these athletes, if you're talking about purely athletes, it's hard to get them. And in this day and age, they're always buzzing. They always got their phones, the Instagram, they got stuff going all the time. To get them in a quiet room, and to get a guy to be able to meditate, to naturally calm his nervous system down. That's what acupuncture, actually, I did some stuff with some of the Aura Ring. A lot of my treatments, it documents them as the sleep time. So that, because we decrease the sympathetic tone, and that's a big part of therapy and a big part of recovery. So there's, like I said, hot, cold, ice baths. Sometimes before bed, there's there's some people that talk about heat during, before sleeping to help them sleep. So there are different things that you could do, and the muscle stim's a great thing for like a local area. But if you're looking more global, I'd be looking at those kind of things.
So well put. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis did a lot of reading back in the day. Certainly not the studies that you've had in intent in structured format, but what we do for our athletes when we have a 3-day rollover program, kind of like a Dan Pfaff and Stu McMillan for our pro players. But on those off days, we provide opportunities and we call it menu items for quote unquote parasympathetic recovery, or, to give them ideas to do on their own. We're not certainly qualified, at least as a strength coach for me, of, doing acupuncture or anything like that, but we do provide ideas, whether they take those or not, to get that parasympathetic tone back for that rest and recovery. So excellent. Overarching, and I say pivot, but really not pivot. And I know this is probably a really broad question, so you can answer it any way you want and break it down for me. Overarching treatment philosophy that you have, maybe you could put it in 4 or 5 bullet points. And I know it's probably specific to the athlete or what the problem is that's being brought to you, but what is your overarching treatment philosophy?
What do you mean by overarching?
I'll give you an example for me, right? For a strength coach, do no harm. The goal here for us in terms and measures of eliminating any kind of injury in the weight room, doing our best will never eliminate injuries on the ice. That's not going to happen. We're going to try to reduce our chance by having a quality program and then improve performance. Is it movement efficiency? Is it as simple as, hey, just reducing pain? Or is there a process and philosophy that you abide by?
Yeah. Okay. So then when you said that, so I say it to my patients, whether it's an athlete or not. I treat them all; they're all the same to me.
Okay.
I'm not trying to treat pain. Treating pain is very difficult. To do true pain treatment, like it's tricky, it's complicated. It's like, and even it gets very. I'm treating function. So what I'm trying to do is my overarching. Now that you say it that way, treatment philosophy is improve neuromotor function, and
I
that's what
like
I'm
that.
trying to do. I'm trying to improve the soft tissue sliding between layers of fascia, nerves, ligaments, tendons, bones, periosteum. So I'm just trying to improve neuromotor function, improve neuromotor efficiency, and that in turn, I've got a track record now. So I mean, you could say it improves performance and improves pain, decreases pain, and improves performance and longevity.
I
That's
like it.
that's the that's the that's the overarching. I think that answers your question.
Today's episode has been brought to you by Physical Preparation for Ice Hockey, Biological Principles and Practical Solutions, and the Gain Go Grow Manual. This is a 2-part book series exploring training the intermediate and advanced level players. Book number 1 explores training the intermediate player. Chapters include long-term athletic development, considerations, speed training, power training, strength training, and program design. The Gain Go Grow Manual explores training the high-performance hockey player. Chapters include biomechanics of ice hockey, considerations for high performers, minimizing adaptational risks while upsizing gains, the Gain Go Grow model, and example microcycles. More information can be found at Amazon.com. Absolutely does. Big rocks in terms of KPIs pertaining to evaluating hockey players. Perhaps it's a hockey player that comes into you just at the start of the off season. Perhaps it's there's no one in pain there. They don't have a recovery. They want to move well. Are there certain metrics, and you might say there's none, we treat the athlete, we treat it as a holistic approach. Are there certain areas that you go after? For example, the hips. Are there certain areas that you go after? The ankles, they're locked in a skate boot. Is it based on biomechanics, or is it simply, when they walk in, it's kind of more of a holistic approach, top down, bottom up?
Yeah, with a hockey player, it is. I'd say 70 to 80% is their hips.
Okay.
Realistically, their ankles. I check, I scan everyone's ankles, and to be honest with you, a lot of them are like, no one's touched my ankles, and you're 100% right. People think because they're locked in a skate, in a boot, that they don't move. But these new skates, everyone is like lacing them, leaving the upper eyelid open. They're actually getting way more dorsiflexion and to do some of the maneuvers that they're doing on the ice, which are ridiculous. They need more ankle, foot mobility, and they do get locked up, whether it be from the boot or from training or from everyday life. That area does get locked up, so they do respond really well when they do get them treated and released. The hips always lock up, especially the shooting side. Unless they've had an injury, then they might. I've got a specific pattern that I look for.
Okay.
Generally, the shooting side's tighter than the contralateral side. If they're right-handed shot, their right side will be tighter, and the body tolerates that. If they have had an injury or something, if I see their patterning off, generally you're looking for an old injury that the players forgot about, and you'll pick something up. But very, very commonly, I pick up old injuries that have lingering neurobiomechanical insufficiencies that have caused them to have abnormal patterning, because the body does tolerate some. Well, hockey is an asymmetric sport.
Sure.
So the body tolerates the asymmetry very well, but when you start altering their patterning, that's when they're prone to chronic fatigue, chronic injuries, like the wear and tear injuries. Like, I was just skating and this happened, and I go, that shouldn't have happened. So something should that stuff should be predictable. Like, hockey's a collision sport. All sorts of, you're not going to prevent everything, like you said.
Yep.
Crazy stuff happens on the ice when they're flying around, but the non-contact, the kind of strains, there's a lot of injuries that our goals are always trying to, prevent, minimize those kind of injuries. And you got to remember, you have as kids, these guys have they're coming, unless you've treated them since they were a kid, they're coming to you with a whole slew of old stuff that you kind of clean up, so to speak, before you really get them on course sometimes.
I want to dig a little deeper here because I'm really fascinated with this. So let's take the same hockey player, and you said typically they're shooting side with hips, right? Do you see an internal rotation deficit on that side, typically based on your work with
Yes.
hockey players? And then my question is, what tools do you use? You said acupuncture, so could you? I don't know if that would be the tool, but whatever tool you use, if you could explain, because our audience here, Doc, is some of them are going to be really deep with the kind of the geeky physiology. Like, I don't know if you use that tool, how does it help? How does it clean up the pattern? And then do you measure it before and after? For example, do you get the goniometer out and the IR, do your method, and then how do you measure it?
Oh, I've got with the changes that I'll make, you don't need a goniometer. You could use your iometer, as Matt Nickel coined.
I like that, Doc. I like that.
I'm going to give it to him. He did coin it, the iometer.
I like that.
The changes that I'll make, you can see. You don't need no goniometer.
That's awesome.
And the athlete will stand up and he'll notice a change. But generally, you're right. You do lose internal rotation at 90-90. People think that it's because the foot goes out, but it's internal femoral rotation at 90-90.
Okay.
Even it could be internal rotation at prone, but you have to just make sure that you're saying femoral rotation. I know me and you know what we're talking about. But that's what some other people can say. It looks like it's moving out, or like the players. And generally, so now to improve that, there are many techniques. You can use different soft tissue techniques. People have used shock wave, and this is why I say that I've got no bias or no marriage to acupuncture personally.
Sure.
People say I don't believe in it. I go, neither do I. I know how it works, and I can tell you the whole the neuromotor pathway from the muscle to the brain. I've studied it. I got to continue to review it because it's so complicated. I know it's there, and they mapped it. But it still fascinates me that you're sticking a little needle and you're, creating these results. But if you find me a better technique or a different modality that provides me better results immediately, I'm gone. I'm going to use that. Until this day, I haven't found it, and I've went around the globe looking for it. The reason why I think acupuncture does provide the results, the changes that we are looking for with these athletes, is because there's no other modality that can get deep enough. In a simple way, I'll just say that my needles for these hockey players are 10 centimeters long to get into their glutes, to get to their joint capsule. Their obturator nerve, that's very superficial. So that's much more superficial than you realize. You have the obturator nerve has a few branches, has the anterior branch and the posterior branch. But the anterior branch has a little recurrent branch that goes right to the hip joint capsule. So one is just stimulating the obturator nerve, changes internal rotation immediately. Why? Because of the neuroproprioceptive response with the joint capsule. Then you could do needling of the glute med and min. The glute min is this is the glute med, glute max, glute medius, and then glute minimus is vertical on the hip. You could needle the musculo-tendinous junction, the tenoperiosteal junction of the reflected head of the vastus lateralis. That goes right into the superior acetabulum, plus the labrum. It's got fascial connections directly to the labrum that I've dissected and shown. So these guys that have super tight quads, every hockey player has tight quads, they've got a tugging right on their labrum from the vastus lateralis, which is a muscle that all hockey players have a massive one. Overdeveloped. And no one treats these things. No one thinks about the reflected head that goes right into the joint capsule, not right into the labrum. Yeah. So then that's one reason why I really I use acupuncture at first to soften up, to open things up, and then I carry on with my soft tissue techniques. You could do some joint pumping. You could do whatever you want, but if you don't have the needles to open up the perfusion to those deep structures, you're going to get limited results. I'm really that's what I've seen, and that's my story, and that's what I'm sticking with. Until someone shows me something better, it's like you ain't going to get it.
Second Charlie Francis analogy. I want to make sure I understand this right. So let's take that same hockey player. So he comes in, he walks in, and we can't get that. We can't open up the quad. So essentially, there's a wreck on the highway. When we stick the needle in and create that circuitry, we remove the debris from the highway, so we get a better electrical circuit from the brain to the muscle. Is that accurate when I say that,
Yeah.
or is that how it essentially works, or is it? I know it's way more complicated than that, but is that how it works?
No, that's what you do. You have it's actually trigger points generally are motor points. So people find those really tight areas and they hammer on them. Generally, that's where the motor neuron splays into the muscle almost like a little spider.
Got it.
And when the needle touches that motor end plate, sometimes you get this big twitch response. And that's the muscle just holding tight and just relaxing. And then, like you said, you get the brain motor pathway just opens up and resets. So in traditional terms, they'd say stimulate a muscle, turn one way, inhibit a muscle, turn the other. The reality is the brain wants to go to homeostasis. The body does. So if we're stimulating it in a way to give it information, it will naturally go towards home. So we were always right, whether we turned it right or turned it left, we'd always normalize the tissue because the body's going to do the right thing anyway. So we're just trying to give it a little information. Hey, this muscle's holding either tight or not firing early enough, not firing strong enough, is inhibited. Really, that's you don't want to use the term weak or strong with an athlete. They inhibited or turned off. They like that. They like turned on or turned off. And acupuncture will either loosen a tight muscle or stimulate inhibited, turned off muscle. And it just cleans that neuromotor pathway.
I love it. And you know what? I'm not going to get in there because I could talk in hours for you just about this, but I also love what you just talked about. Not your bad one, or it's your turned off or on. It's amazing how important communication is to athletes. Let me tell you, it's not your injured one. It's your left one or right one, or I know it's small, but it's huge. It is the perception of the treatment might be just as important as the treatment.
100%. Hey, people like you could tell a veteran because he picks exactly what you set up. And I learned the hard way because you see what do you mean weak? What do you mean weak? Oh, no, it's not weak, bro. Like, and first of all, I can't make it if my treatment makes you strong right after, it wasn't weak. So then you learn. We all learn the hard way. So sometimes I'm trying to, I mentor a lot of people and I try to teach them, hey, listen, these words, like you just said, matter. And you got to remember, we're talking about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. If your life depends on your body, but like when you think you're injured and you think you're not fixable, it's stressful, man. That's going to affect your recovery
big time.
So it's neurological. It's not. It's the sympathetic. Your sympathetic tone goes up. Of course, their healing is going to. If they're comfortable, like you said, when we're talking about going to do surgeries or this or that, how do you like the surgeon? Did you feel comfortable with him? No, I didn't. But this is the better. You know what? You have to feel. If you don't feel comfortable with them, let's keep looking. You got to find who you're comfortable with because that makes a difference. And even me, if you don't feel comfortable with me, but you don't like the way don't hang.
So true. So true. So true. So I want to continue with your treatment modalities now. So we've done the intervention, which is our acupuncture. Where does and I'm very intrigued with this, specifically with PRI. I've done many PRI courses. I struggle with it at times. I'll be honest with you, Doc. I struggle. Perhaps it's a time element that we don't have a large amount of time with our athletes. DNS, I've taken some courses as well. I don't know if they're all fixing the same thing. In DNS, they call it the open scissor posture, and PRI, they call it the left AIC or the PEC, which essentially is one innominate flipped anteriorly or bilaterally. Where does position fit once acupuncture is reached? And I know it's a loaded question. I know you use these tools, but do you feel like you can hold on to that position once someone leaves and walks away and performs an X practice, or is that something that's constantly brought back? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was a couple times. So I did a lot of DNS, back then I was studying with collage. I don't think it was really called DNS back then, but it was Pavel. I traveled around with Pavel and kind of watched a lot of his stuff. And Now it's DNS. So I know of PRI, and I love them both, and they both have a place in the athletes retraining and
Yep.
restabilizing, primarily of the pelvis. And they're really good for that. To answer your question, when you're so I do the soft tissue work, then I say, me and you're working together, and you do your PRI or DNS. Perfect. That's actually, even when I walked into the Yankees, I noticed one of the Fonzie was doing DNS, and I picked it up right away, and I go, "Oh, you do DNS?" He goes, "Yeah, how do you know?" And I go, "Because I've studied it." And so then right away, I came in not knowing anybody, and next thing you know, it was smooth. It was unbelievable. So
Great.
I did my thing, and then he did his thing, and he noticed his results were a little smoother. So then you start working together very quick. So to answer your question, I do believe that stuff can hold, but the problem is, and it's not really a problem. The reality is they continue to perform the activity that created the imbalance in the first place.
Well
So
put.
it
Yeah.
could hold if they stopped the activity, or if they did an activity that was more balanced. The problem is most sport in general is unilateral at some level. So you'll always develop imbalances. And some of these imbalances aren't bad, like pitchers.
Correct.
Pitchers throwing arms, their lats are twice the size. I'm not going to train your other lat to try to rebalance it. It doesn't, and you could train them both, but it doesn't matter. In season, you're not going to rebalance. And some asymmetries, the tennis players, they're fully asymmetrical. But like I said, the body tolerates, after a while, the brain figures out some of these imbalances and tolerates it very well. And it's when you change their, all of a sudden, say if we're going back to hockey, their whole right side's a little tighter, but all of a sudden they get an ankle sprain, and now the whole body has to recalibrate and rebalance. That's when injuries can happen. These non-traumatic injuries, you always have to be careful with the wording.
Yep.
So I do believe these things can hold, but you'd have to take out the aggravating or the assault on the mechanics. But we don't take out the mechanics. That's why they need, maintenance treatment, tune-ups, preventative care, corrective training. That's what, the preventative care, corrective training, and then you go into the performance training. After the season with Maddie, we do the first month or so is all corrective, and then after that, they start doing, their lifting, their strength training, their speed training, then their energy systems. Like there's a whole, like you guys have a whole system for that.
Sure.
And that's beyond my, that's why we all work together. We can't be a master of everything. It's just because if you get really good at everything, then you don't know, like there's too much at one thing. That's the one thing I realized, even anatomy, even neurology, I'm going to die not learning half the shit that I want to learn.
I know.
Like I realized the more I know, I'm done.
One of my favorites. One of my favorite sayings, Doc, is your island of knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of your ignorance. As you learn more, you're just like, oh my gosh, I have more questions than answers. It's crazy. Yeah. I want to pivot. I know you're passionate about this, and the high performance model. I want to specifically target the National Hockey League or the NHL. High performance hockey, we'll call it. I know you've worked in professional baseball. I know you've worked at high level track, but I want to bring this down to hockey. This model, technical, tactical, physiological, and physical. Where are we right now based on you looking at this model at the National Hockey League, or for that matter, let's just call it high performing hockey?
Or
can I ask that? What are your thoughts?
Some things haven't changed one iota. 20 years later, and 23, like I haven't seen, some things haven't changed one iota. Some things there's been very strong attempts. The performance side, from the strength training side, things have changed night and day, 100%. Everything's changed. You have to be careful saying that. And I know some people would disagree with me, but I'm talking in the big picture stuff. There's some things that we're trying to do the right things. I'm talking about because I know what's out there and what's possible. And then I see where they've come, and it's so slow. It's like, that's when I say it hasn't changed. It has changed. When I really think about it, there's a lot of change, but it hasn't changed much. That's fair to say. So the metrics side, night and day, 100%. The problem is, what are we doing with those metrics? How much has that the new these people are coming in with graphs with all sorts of stuff, which is great. But what are we doing with them, and what do they mean? Like, we still have two trainers in a room most of the time, maybe three. Like the good teams have three all the time. Maybe when they're coming home, these guys are playing more hockey, playing faster, playing stronger, harder than ever before. Their treatment hasn't changed that much on my end. Their training's changed a bit, but even the training, it's hard. That's where I'm kind of saying we haven't. The game's changed a lot. I think the dressing room treatment side has had the potential to change a lot, but hasn't. That's
It's interesting because I have a couple piggyback questions, but mine's not really a question. I'm just ranting and talking with you here collectively. But specifically with the metric side, I think it's interesting. I think we can learn some things from it as well. But I think a lot of times I have the same question as you: is what are we doing with those? And then maybe more important, the key decision makers, the coaches, like, do they care about them?
a lot. Yeah.
Do because how are they being acted on? And then what are the unintended consequences of that actual metric? Like, how are you communicating that to the player? And then if you're creating, if you're creating a proxy, which is an indirect measure, and calling it a measure, and then creating a target, like, what is the indirect result of that? Like, what are the unintended consequences of that, if that makes sense? Are you studying all summer for algebra when you have a Spanish exam? You know what I mean? So I sometimes question that out loud. I'm more along the lines of someone like Dan Pfaff. Create one to three KPIs that are important relative to the sport. Start from the scoreboard, work backwards.
Yes.
Create the longitudinal data over time, and then answer, and only then answer, what's good, what's bad. And then I think other metrics. And again, I'm ranting again. Like GPS, for example, I think this is great. I think you can use that for return to play. Those are outliers, right? Someone's injured, you know what their workloads are. You can work them up objectively back to where they're at. So sorry for the rant. I did have a question for you. You said some things haven't changed, specifically with treatment. So my question to you is, how would you propose that they do change? For example, if you're in charge tomorrow of a performance staff, how would it change? Would you have more people, more staff members on the treatment side? Like, how do you feel it should evolve?
Well, I think back in the days, there was a while that I was, we spent 4 years or something like that with the Leafs. We had, the communicate. Actually, I was on the Leafs with Matt, and and we had full buy-in of the team because Gary Roberts was there, and he was like fully bought in. Matt's was there, and these guys were like, they'd listen to whatever Matty would say. So we had, our communication was phenomenal. Like, and a lot of times you work together. After you work together for so long, there's stuff that is understood that, when you need to talk, you talk. When you don't need to, you kind of understand stuff, give a little look or something. But we actually had, myself, Mark, we had many therapists, and we had an auxiliary therapist come in for the other team, the Marlies. Everyone would start to buy into the model, and it was all very well communicated, very well organized. So what I would do is, I'd have more therapists come in. Especially, you don't have to have them right all the time. Like when the team's at home, every player should be screened, soft tissue wise, therapy wise, and given a little tune up at least once every week, once every 2 weeks, no matter whether you feel. Right now we're at an injury treatment model. We're not at a preventative screening model. And a lot of times the guys are like, oh, he had a great game, leave him alone. What do you mean? Like, why do you have a great game? Let's keep him having a great game. Why wait till something happens? But most of the time it's due to lack of resources, physical exhaustion, the travel, and the schedules of anyone that works full time with the team is vicious. Like, people,
Sure,
don't forget about that. And then again, some training staffs talking to their strength coaches, it's very good. Some it's non-existent. We have to put down. Too many people are there kind of protecting their jobs, trying to not to rattle fences. You have coaches that, walk by the whole training room and don't want to spoil the players. What do you mean spoil? Like, we're trying to keep the Ferrari moving. We're not spoiling the Ferrari. We're keeping it humming. There is a lot of different views, and then people are, see those other views, and they're trying to protect themselves, which I understand too. And then the only person that suffers is the athlete.
I like that your analogy that you and I spoke off the air, the Ferrari analogy.
Yeah,
You
that's my
know,
favorite. Yeah, that's my thing.
the tune up of the Ferrari.
I have a newsletter. I call it a newsletter for high performance practitioners, and I got a Ferrari there with 12 mechanics. Meanwhile, we have 23 hockey players with and two mechanics.
Yeah, I think I can't speak out loud here. I'm not a general manager. I'm not a front office staff member of the National League, but perhaps their narrative is, hey, there's too much standing around. I like your idea though of at least in the home games and being more preventative as opposed to reactive. And I get it. Every situation's different. And I say preventative in the fact that even if the athlete's feeling well, you're getting tune-ups, right? Like even if there is no quote unquote injury or quote unquote sidetrack, or am I accurate in saying that?
100%. But then now comes the caveat in a lot of therapists don't know how to treat preventative too. So now the whole system, there's a lot of work that needs now. Now that I'm hearing you talk about it, then there's a lot of I keep thinking that it's guys like me and guys like you that have seen things, done things, guys on my team that could, treat these things before, because we're looking for someone, we're assessing someone. But then, there are some really good things, the good assessment techniques, and you guys have some, especially in the strength training. You guys have done some really good stuff trying to elevate everything. And the therapy side, there's still some work to be done. Therapists, there's a lot of range. Everyone says, I do what you do, and I'm like, okay. But there is a big variance in therapy. So I do, when you're a GM, to answer the question, how do I know who's good and who's bad? That's tough, man. I don't know how to answer. So, think about that. If I'm thinking about,
I know
if I have to pick a therapy team, I know guys that I've trained, but to go out kind of blind and start looking for local people, that could get daunting now that I'm thinking about their challenges. Because you don't know there's a lot of people that talk a big talk, but don't, show the results. It all comes back down to results with the athletes, which is what we originally saw. And now I was with the Jays for 15 years. We had an unbelievable therapy team. And then
just curious, what if you could let me in and what would be the comparison between a therapy team in Major League Baseball, like in terms of numbers of staff, comparatively speaking to the National Hockey League? More or less the same?
Depends on the team. Actually, similar. Depends on the team. I think I've been spoiled. The Jays back then under George Poulos were unbelievable. He pushed for a lot. He pushed to have a lot of availability for the players. And now I'm with the Yankee guys. They have an unbelievable training stuff. Like I was walked in, and when I saw them all, it was like crazy. And then I know the Leafs have a lot of guys. There's a couple teams I know they're trying. Like I said, they do have a lot of guys available for the guys. So I mean, whether they have two ATs and then plus an assistant, plus a couple guys that come in and out, massage therapist. So they're people are trying. Does that answer your question? It's not.
Sure.
So that I don't know how to answer that truly because I've got a limited pool of what I've seen. So mind you, I've seen two different teams in baseball and two different teams in hockey, but I think I've been spoiled a little bit that way. Everyone I've been with has been trying to do the right stuff.
Sure. And then I want to tag a little bit more under your idea versus preventative versus reactive. These modalities, meaning the ones that we just talked about in the last hour, of whether it's acupuncture, deep tissue massage, these are proactive, meaning, regardless of who walks in, we're not responding to a strain. We're not responding to an MCL injury. We are working on healthy athletes with the modalities that we've trained for on a daily basis. That would be the new health model. Does that make sense?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Teaching, you mentioned education. Did some due diligence before you and I spoke. I want to make sure this is still taking place. Are you still offering mentorships for students? You had Could you tell us more about that? I wanted to ask more about your teaching.
Well, my mentorships are for licensed healthcare practitioners. So
yes.
Specifically for therapists. So I do an elite mentorship kind of course with the hockey programs that I work with in the summer.
That's awesome.
Um, and where I'll have people shadowing me, watching, help seeing what I do, so they see the whole spectrum of what we do, trying to show people what's what we're talking about, treating I work with with Matty. Every one of his athletes has to be treated once a week minimum, and this is whether they feel good or not. So this is what people see, and they start to understand what I'm looking for, why, what we do to correct things or change things or optimize things. See, you don't want, like, again, the wording's important. And so we're trying to show people how to start scanning, looking for things, and try to pick things up early and prevent or optimize.
Looking back at your career now, if you could give some advice to a up and coming treatment therapist, whether it's a physical therapist, chiropractor, looking back at your experiences, what are a couple pieces of advice you could give them?
I got some young guys, like, don't be don't be in it for the right reasons. Don't be looking to get your hands on any. Don't be in a rush to see an athlete. Be in a rush to learn what's out there. Be in a rush to find someone that's where you want to be, and just help them. Like, there's too many athletes for all of us to treat. There's a lot of work. There's tons of work. Work's not the problem. Being good is the problem, and having the time to study, having the help. If you find someone that's in your neighborhood that's seeing all the athletes, go hang out with them. Go get them a coffee, and just clean up the beds, hang, and just watch. And you're gonna see amazing things, like you were talking about. The way they speak, their interactions, then their treatment process, their body position. Start picking up the little things, their hand contacts, everything. Just watch everything, and you will be surprised at how much can, through osmosis. And then once you've earned your keep, ask them questions. They want to help, trust me, but they're busy and they need help. Ask them if they need any help with anything. You start helping them, they'll give you their heart and soul. I know I want to help people. I've got one guy's hanging out right now that I've mentored, that he's just always there, and whatever I need, he's like, I got it already. Like, now he's like, can you do this for me? Oh, it's already done. Are you kidding me? It's done. Like, amazing. What can I do for you? Let me help you. Like, as you want to help people, but we're tired to have people come in and asking us something for nothing. Like, I don't need something. Don't get me wrong, but don't just ask and ask and ask. Like, earn your keep, and we'll give you more than you ever asked.
100%. I think good mentorship is not raising parrots, it's creating critical thinkers. And I think part of doing so is really watching and sitting back and taking like almost a dragonfly vision. If you're a young aspiring coach, where you're seeing everything, you're listening to those cues, and then you're asking really good targeted questions. But I can
Yes,
tell you, to me, the art of really critical thinkers, not so much, it's the questions they ask, right?
100%. It's the questions. Yeah, like, that's the wrong question. Like, that's not the right question. So if you're watching, you'd have asked the right question. This is what you want to ask. And sometimes it is it's just a discussion. You could just, no, that's, for instance, when I was taking acupuncture course, I forget what the question was, but I put up my hand and I said, how does this work? We don't know. What do you mean we don't know? That's what Alejandro said. The first Dr. Loriega said, what do you mean? No teachers ever told me we don't know. No, we don't know. Someone that tells you differently is lying. This is what we do know, though. And he reformulated the question. And that was the first time that I started to say, there's a lot of stuff that you and I, physiologically, we don't know. Sometimes, for instance, all the acupuncture always helped all the athletes recover for years. Then about it used to be 3 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, maybe 6 years, a study came out that showed that, acupuncture, large intestine 10 to LI4, but it's really any autonomic points, increases mesenchymal stem cell release by 300 times. By 300 times, that's huge. So
Sure.
the body's got mesenchymal stem cells just clearing tissue out, clearing the micro trauma from exercise, and these people are recovering quickly. I knew something was happening, and these guys were feeling better, feeling stronger, could train harder. We didn't understand the exact mechanisms, but that doesn't mean we should stop doing it. If you don't as long as, like you said, we create no harm, notice, observe the positive results, and now the research is catching up. And now, oh my God, that's why there was mesenchymal cells. That makes a massive. That answers a certain question and makes a big difference. So sometimes we don't understand the exact mechanisms, reasons why something works with one athlete, doesn't work with the other, but we listen to the athlete, we make our observations, and we make an educated conclusion with together and try to improve the results.
So true. I relate this. I've learned a lot from Chaotic Systems and some of the readings I have, but one of my favorite authors, Nazim Nicholas Taleb, the author of The Black Swan, he said, the absence of evidence is not the same as the evidence. The absence of evidence is not the same as the evidence of absence.
Yes.
So we don't know many times what works and what doesn't, but, or at least explaining, we can see it sometimes with our eyes, like our iometer.
Yes. Iometer. Yeah.
I'm stealing that one from you, Doc.
I gave it's Matt's, so I'm giving it to him. But
all right,
I'll
give it to Matt, but it's coming from you, Doc. Where can we learn? Where can our listeners learn more about you?
Me, I've got an Instagram. I don't even know what my Instagram. I think it's at Mike Prebeg or at Doctor. I don't even know. I'm going to look at it.
I can link it to show notes, Doc.
Yeah, and then I got Skills in Hand. I got a website for courses, skillsinhand.com. And those are, that's all I really have out there right now myself. And, if people through my Instagram, they can probably get a hold of me if they have any questions or comments. I'll get to those eventually.
Last question, Doc. Legacy. You've been in this game for a long time. You've been, had some amazing mentors along the way. How do you want your legacy to be remembered?
You know what? I have these discussions with my, with Alejandro. We talk about. I'm not here for legacy, man. I think that's a thing that they kind of pump up. It's because I've seen now. I see Charlie Francis, and I see these guys that have done it all, and now he's gone. I know his wife Angela, and we still talk, and. When you're gone, you're gone. Right now, when I'm living, I'm going to do my best for me, for my family, for, my friends around me. Other than that, I don't know. This whole legacy thing, I'm a little jaded on because I've seen good people that passed, and you see how much they've changed, and they fought so hard, and maybe that's why I'm just jaded, and I just do my thing now, and that's it. Like I said, I'm try to help, and don't get me wrong, I love what I do. I'll teach whoever I can teach and who wants to learn, but legacy is not something I think about anymore.
No, it makes perfect sense. Our guest today has been Dr. Mike Prebeg. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time, Doc.
Thank you for having me.